Going live here, 4:09 p.m., February the 14th, Valentine's Day. Before I get into this Wrestling Observer review, everyone should check out my 2019 career interview with Greg the Hammer Valentine, now posted free on the Hannibal TV, along with my full shoot interview with Sabu, which I just posted earlier today on this channel. I had said I was going to do this review earlier, but there is a lot of news today. I'm going to do my XFL updates separate. Let's start it off. Hulk Hogan's going to be on SmackDown tonight. I believe he's also going to be returning to Saudi Arabia later this month because, you know, he does fight for the rights of every man. So he goes to a place where they still kill gay people and discriminate against women. The women basically have to be all covered. They can be beaten and so forth there. In other WWE news, the February 7th SmackDown taping in San Jose had a crowd of 6,500 paid. February 10th Raw taping in Ontario, California had 7,100 fans. The February 8th NXT live event in Las Vegas drew 1,100 fans. February 9th NXT in Riverside, California had 1,300 fans. The main roster had two house shows last week. They were both super shows. We keep hearing all this talk that never ever happens about roster separation. Both house shows were combined Raw and SmackDown house shows. February 8th in Oakland, they had 5,500 fans. February 9th in Fresno, they had 5,900 fans. It's noteworthy that WrestleMania season is usually their best season for house shows, but they've canceled so many house shows that they're actually hardly doing any compared to previous years. And that's a little odd that they wouldn't at least do more this time of year where they usually draw well. WWE did announce on February 10th that WrestleMania 37 is going to be at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California, just outside of LA, March 28th, 2021. Hall of Fame, SmackDown, NXT TakeOver, and Raw are all going to be from the Staples Center in LA that week. The stadium is scheduled to open this July. It's going to be the home of the LA Rams and Chargers. For football, it has a capacity of over 70,240 to be exact, but it can be expanded another 30,000 seats, which is what they're going to do for the Super Bowl. They're expecting 100,000 people for the Super Bowl there. WWE is probably going to try and announce their biggest WrestleMania crowd ever if they can fill that place. They had previously said WrestleMania 32 was their biggest crowd ever. They reportedly had 101,763 for that show at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, back in April 2016. However, the Arlington Police Department later reported that there was actually only 80,709 fans that went through the turnstile for that previous record crowd. WWE is known to exaggerate crowds. WWE grossed $960,442,000 in 2019 with a profit of $77,061,000. Compare that to their previous year profit. They had $99,588,000 in profit. So their profit margin was less, considering that the new TV offers are now in effect, or the new TV deals with Fox and USA are in effect, and NXT is also getting money from the USA. So you'd think the profit would be more, but it wasn't. Apparently, WWE's investment in Tap Out last year was a loss of 150,000, and the previous year they lost 156,000. Tap out with wrestling, I never really understood that because it made sense with MMA because you would tap out in MMA. It is a competitive sport, but you don't see too many people wearing tap out clothes anymore, so I never really understood that. WWE currently has 960 employees. They have a roster of 300 wrestlers. Apparently, only about 187 of those wrestlers are currently being used on house shows. So there are more than 100 people under contract or training that are not being used on house shows or TV tapings. Apparently, Goldberg is going to be wrestling on the Saudi Arabia event this month on the 27th against The Fiend. The Fiend is the biggest merch seller right now in WWE, but Goldberg significantly boosted SmackDown's rating last week. So it is believed that there's actually an excellent chance that Goldberg is going to win that match, and probably a short match, and go on to face Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, because there would be more interest in a Goldberg versus Roman Reigns WrestleMania match than Goldberg versus The Fiend. More people know who Goldberg is. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Apparently, photos have been released on the upcoming Suicide Squad movie, and based on the drawings of the face, body, and tattoos, it appears that Batista could very well be playing the character of Bane in the Suicide Squad movie. Bobby Farmer says he would love to see Goldberg against Reigns. Any update on Billy Graham? Motor Stash says, I'm supposed to be doing an interview with him next month in March. Ralph Vaquero says, sounds like numbers are down. Well, gross, WWE is actually grossing huge numbers, and they still had a very large profit. Let's look at that profit again. Their profit was $77,061,000. So that's a huge profit. So you have to say that's pretty good. They're making 77 million. So whether you like the product or find it to be shit, they still profited $77 million plus. So that's pretty damn good. Brian Clark Jr., 55, the former Atom Bomb, was charged with conspiracy of illegal control of enterprise, transporting and selling narcotics, drug possession, and possessing a weapon during a drug offense that allegedly took place last January and April, these crimes. So he's facing those charges. Sorry to hear about that. I mean, a lot of wrestlers have problems making money in the real world after their wrestling careers ended. Hopefully, this is some type of mix-up with him, but it seems unlikely. There's still no full explanation as to why Michelle Wilson and George Barrios were fired, according to Dave Meltzer. Within the company, apparently they're against the idea of signing up a lot of talent that aren't being used and paying them large amounts of money just to keep them from going to other companies. John Cena is returning on February 28th on the SmackDown television show. It's very possible he's going to wrestle at WrestleMania. He already said, as I reported weeks ago, that he's going to be at WrestleMania in some capacity. Apparently, WWE is making overtures to some U.S. indie companies regarding their tape libraries. So they are probably going to be looking for more network content as my phone goes off. Keep forgetting to take my home phone out of this room when I'm doing these. Becky Lynch has said that she believes she should be the highest paid person in the WWE, including Vince McMahon. I still haven't seen a Becky Lynch match, but they're obviously pushing her. I've seen that 2K20 commercial. It was all about putting her over. She was in the match before the Royal Rumble. I like to watch girls' matches for girls I'm attracted to overall. I don't find her that attractive, but I am going to watch one of her matches. For her to be the highest paid person in WWE, obviously Goldberg really moved ratings recently. Brock Lesnar and Goldberg are both mainstream names, so is John Cena. Obviously, they're worth more money than her. House show business was terrible last year. They were canceling house shows left, right, and center. She was appearing on a lot of those shows, so obviously she should not be the highest paid person. It's not like business is great. They're not even getting 1 ratings. There's a story going around that Brie and Nikki Bella, as well as Jushin Liger, are all going to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame this year. Randy Orton did an angle on Monday where he severely injured Matt Hardy in the same way that he severely injured Edge. Although Matt Hardy is returning next Monday to wrestle Randy Orton, whereas Edge is still out. It is believed Matt Hardy's contract is almost up. He could either stay in WWE, go to AEW, go to ROH, but ROH, he's probably not going to get a lot of publicity these days. Not a lot of people are watching it. In all likelihood, he'll probably go to AEW or stay in WWE because that's where you can make the most money. He is rich and well off, but you still want to go to the place where you can make the most money. He would have more creative control in AEW. Vince, here's something I really don't agree with Dave Meltzer on. Vince was at one point in one of these teleconferences he did, was playing the card that AEW was more of a blood and guts company, and Meltzer complained in this week's Observer that this new character WWE is doing with Baszler, biting wrestlers and having fake blood after she bites them. He feels that that is worse than wrestlers doing blade jobs or participating in barbed wire matches. Well, I fully disagree with that. Let me explain to you guys why barbed wire matches are dangerous, other than the fact that you could get seriously injured, like Sabu did with his bicep in that match against Terry Funk. That was one of the reasons he got addicted to pain medications, was from all the barbed wire matches he did. But the other danger of barbed wire matches is if you get thrown into barbed wire, those pieces of barbed wire are going into your skin. They're going in to your body. The pieces of barbed wire are getting blood on them, just the same way a needle would. Now, if your opponent then gets thrown in to that same barbed wire, your blood is going directly into that person. So it's just like sharing a needle, just like sharing a razor blade. How I caught Hep C, which was proven in court. Abdullah the Butcher had Hep C for at least 10 years, had cut himself with a razor blade. Then he cut me without my permission with the same razor blade, effectively transmitting the disease to me. So barbed wire matches are dangerous. Yes, they have testing in the major companies, but you're not being tested every day. You could get infected with something from a home tattoo, home piercing, many ways of doing it. You could catch AIDS from having sex with an unprotected person. Then if you're only tested, let's say every 6 months, you could have a barbed wire match, infect that person in a barbed wire match. It's highly dangerous. And as far as saying that fake blood in a vampire angle is more is more blood and guts than blading, well, look at my lovely forehead from blading. Okay, at least with fake blood, you're not mutilating your own body, and you're not putting anyone in danger of catching anything. So I totally disagree with him that he is saying using fake blood in a vampire angle is worse than blading or having barbed wire matches. Blading, when one person is doing it, when it's not a double blood match, it's a lot less dangerous than having a double blood match. But barbed wire matches are literally pretty much, other than these explosive matches that they seem to have stopped doing, thank God, barbed wire matches are some of the most dangerous matches you could have. MVP is being transitioned into a producer role. The segment on Raw that he did this past week is not meant to be a regular thing, but it went over well, so they might do it again here and there. Biggs21 says Brawl for All retired a lot of wrestlers. Who really did Brawl for All retire other than Brackus, who was never really a wrestler? Bart Gunn continued wrestling for years after that. Bradshaw had certainly hurt his reputation a little bit as a tough guy because he didn't do too well. Neither did Bob Holly, but they kept going for years after. I don't think it hurt anyone's career other than Brackus, he was untrainable from everything I've heard. They just liked his body. He was the only one that really never came back from it. Was it a good idea? It was Vince Russo's idea. Apparently, Vince Russo told me, you can look it up in my shoot interview with Vince Russo, that he came up with that idea because he was sick of Bradshaw going around saying he was the toughest guy on the roster. And his whole point of the Brawl for All was to prove that Bradshaw was not the toughest guy on the roster. Unfortunately, the huge screw up with the Brawl for All was they took Bart Gunn, the winner of that, and put him against Butterbean, who is a professional boxer. And Bart Gunn really had not been trained that long in professional boxing, if at all. And he just was outclassed by Butterbean. They really should have put more of an emphasis on Bart Gunn's training before throwing him in there to get slaughtered, because it made basically all the wrestlers look like shit. Actually, if I had been in there, if I had won the Brawl for All and gone in there against Butterbean, many of you guys forget this because it was rarely used, but you could do double leg attacks. I would have focused on leg dives and single legs, double legs. If I was facing Butterbean, kept my hands up, protected my head very well. But obviously they've stopped doing Brawl for Alls. We have had some kickboxing exhibitions in Great North Wrestling. There probably will be more. John Jones told Sports Illustrated, as I already reported, that it's invitable that he will work for WWE in the future. He could definitely get a good payday out of it. He feels he has the size and athleticism and following to transition over to pro wrestling really well. Simone Johnson, 18, signed with WWE. She will be their first ever fourth generation wrestler. She's going to be starting full time at the Performance Center soon. Of course, she's the daughter of The Rock. And there is talk of The Rock fighting Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 37 in LA. Biggs21 says he thinks Bart Gunn had brain damage because of the knockout. Well, anytime you're knocked out, you're going to get brain damage. 100%. Your brain is being smashed around inside your head when you're getting knocked out. TMZ has reported that Alexa Bliss is now dating singer and songwriter Ryan Cabrera. Due to a conflict during the Full Sail's Hall of Fame week, the March 11th NXT event will be taped somewhere other than Full Sail University. They haven't announced where that taping is going to be yet. Ms. and Mrs. did a 0.11 rating this week. WWE Backstage this week did a 0.6. CM Punk was on the show, and they had an interview with Simone Johnson on that show. Raw did a 0.53 rating this week. SmackDown did a 0.8 rating this last Friday night. Bill Goldberg's appearance was a ratings mover. AEW and NXT were both down this week. AEW won yet again 0.3, and NXT did a 0.24 rating. So neither are getting close to the ones yet, but obviously AEW was renewed for 4 years, and NXT, I believe, has a 2-year contract. So they're going to be around for a while. In other AEW news, they are still not using writers. So that goes to show you that you can have a successful wrestling product with no writers. Boxing Legends 2011 says Matt Hardy's going to AEW. Who knows? Would he actually go if WWE offered him a large amount of money to stay, or a larger amount of money to stay? He's wrestling for WWE next Monday. Tickets for the Double or Nothing 2 taking place, I think, in the spring here, back in Vegas, went on sale today, and apparently it looks like they're going to sell out first day. They did sell out for the original Double or Nothing last year. Jeff Cobb appeared on AEW this week. According to the Wrestling Observer, Cobb is still a free agent. He's only agreed at this point to do a small program with Jon Moxley. Meltzer finds it interesting that they were willing to use a Ring of Honor guy for a short-term program. The footage that they used to introduce Cobb was from All Japan Pro Wrestling rather than New Japan or Ring of Honor, which says something about their relationships with both New Japan and Ring of Honor. Cobb has been offered a deal by Cody, but he really likes working for New Japan. So time will tell what happens with Jeff Cobb. Nyla Rose, the transgender wrestler, won the AEW's Women's Championship. People ask me what I think about that. Well, from a realism point of view, she was born with the body of a man. So, of course, in reality, looking at the size difference and the muscularity difference, as far as reality goes, of course, she can beat the women because she's bigger. It's more realistic than Tessa Blanchard, 123 pounds, holding the Impact title when they have people like Moose, Ken Shamrock, and RVD on the roster. Val Venus made a comment saying AEW made a man their women's champion. AEW makes a woman their men's champion. Who the fuck are these social injustice warriors with the pencils and papers running the industry I love? So that is something that Val Venus said, which, by the way, I did a full career interview with him last year, posted on the Hannibal TV. According to the Observer, Aramis, another little guy, wrestler, high-flying guy, like they need more. Apparently there's interest in AEW signing him. They also have this Jesus character, which I don't know if they've used this Jesus character on TV, but I don't know. To me, that's bad taste. To have someone parading around as Jesus, I don't know. I'm not the most religious person in the world, but to me, that's definitely a bad taste. Now, they were in Cedar Park, Texas for their Dynamite taping this week. They had about 4,000 fans. Now, just to show you, Dave Meltzer is biased against AEW, okay? He was saying they were just shy of a legitimate sellout, which would have been, I guess, 4,274 for the setup that they had. But I looked on the website of the HEB Center in Cedar Park, Texas, and that arena actually holds over 8,000. So I just don't get it these days. Like WWE claims with 10 or 12,000 people, they're selling out Madison Square Garden. Of course, if you block off half the arena, you can say you had a sellout with half the fans, but how can you say that's a legitimate sellout? I could understand like some of the arena being blocked off, but when you're blocking off half the arena or more and saying that they were close to a legitimate sellout, to me, with half the arena blocked off, that is not a legitimate sellout. But nonetheless, it still is a great crowd that they're getting over 4,000 people to a Dynamite taping. On the other hand, Ring of Honor did a show February the 9th in Baltimore that was free. And according to the Wrestling Observer, the building was said to have only been about 60% full. There was a lot of families there, children that don't usually attend Ring of Honor. And according to reports, they didn't seem to know a lot of the wrestlers. They were there more for the free event. And then Dave Meltzer also pointed out that they've had bigger crowds in that arena for shows where they actually charged people. And if you look at Baltimore, that's an area that has about a 2.5 or more, 2.6 possibly metropolitan area, and they can only get 60% of a building full that's not even that big of a building. And it's a free show. That says a lot about Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor actually did a show December 15th in Philadelphia at the ECW Arena that drew a total paid and unpaid of 350 fans. Now compare that to MLW that ran the ECW Arena this month. They had 1,000 fans. So MLW, there's actually more interest than Ring of Honor. And if I had the choice, I know I sometimes seem like I'm anti-AEW. I'm not. I would definitely love to work for AEW. They're the best paying for the least work company out there. But MLW, I would also be open to working for in some capacity because they're actually growing. I've seen growth, and I have a lot of friends in there, and I really have been impressed with their product. AEW, I like some things, I dislike some things, but there's no question they're successful. New Japan Pro Wrestling's most recent U.S. tour was the worst tour for business New Japan has had in the modern regime. According to Dave Meltzer, he says the crowds listed last week in the Observer, which you can go back and read my report from last week, did include the totals paid and unpaid. New Japan will return to prime time in Japan in April with a weekly show at 8 p.m. on Friday nights, which is going to be huge for New Japan. They're also going to do a Wrestle Dynasty event August the 22nd at Madison Square Garden. As things stand right now, according to Meltzer, neither Jon Moxley or Chris Jericho will be allowed to appear on the Madison Square Garden New Japan show due to their AEW contracts. They can still wrestle for New Japan in Japan, though. As my throat starts to get dry. In other Japan news, All Japan Pro Wrestling has signed Davey Boy Smith Jr., who is the Hannibal TV heavyweight champion. He's wrestling for us in August on our event in Ottawa. More information on our event is at thehannibaltv.com. He's going to be working regularly for All Japan starting on April 4th, and he's going to be participating in their Carnival tournament that's going to be going on until May 5th. Of course, Davey Boy Smith Jr. is also in MLW. They've recently signed a deal with Webdia, which is a streaming platform in France, to have the show on in France. I wonder if that's going to be English or French commentary. In MMA news, I will get to some of your questions when I'm done the MMA news, by the way. The UFC television ratings in 2019 were actually up. Imagine that, combat sports having their ratings increase in 2019. They were up 43% from 2018. They moved from FS1 to ESPN. Their average UFC broadcast had 1.1 million viewers, up from about 700,000. The previous year, John Jones defeated Dominic Reyes, who was undefeated in the main event of UFC 247, February 8th. The show at the Toyota Center in Houston had a legitimate sellout of 17,401 fans for a paid gate of 3,549,418. NXT When Worlds Collide, that took place in the same building January 25th, only had a crowd of 3,500. After being knocked out by Dominic Reyes in his light heavyweight debut, Chris Wheeldman is moving back to middleweight and wants to fight at the Barclay Center show April the 18th. UFC has said that the Ministry of Sports in France is working with the French Boxing Federation to regulate MMA, which would be a good thing because UFC has been wanting to run an event there. UFC is very popular and would like to come to Paris, according to the Wrestling Observer. The November 9th KSI versus Logan Paul celebrity fight at the Staples Center in LA drew 10,577 total fans for a live gate of 808,669. It also had over 1 million streaming buys. So that's pretty good for two boxers having their debut. Say what you want about YouTube stars. YouTube is the future for sure. BJ Penn, who is 41, recently had a UFC fight canceled last year due to alcohol-related stupid fights that he got into in bars, is now being investigated for possible DUI. According to Big Island Now, Penn was in an auto accident February 7th. The police report said he lost control of his black pickup truck and flipped the truck in front of a shopping mall. He had no passengers. He was transported to the hospital in an ambulance. The police captain has said speed was a factor in the crash, and Penn is being investigated for a DUI after they drew blood from him upon his arrival to the hospital. The Legacy Fighting Alliance has filed a lawsuit against Access TV, now owned by Anthem, the same company that owns Impact. The suit is for $700,000, and it's related to Access dropping their programming, saying they had 9 events left to show on the network, and they were being paid $27,500 per show. Now, I could understand as a promoter how that could really screw with you as a promoter, because if you're expecting an extra $27,500 in TV money from events you're going to put on per event, that's a huge loss of money when you have to pay fighters, pay arenas, pay insurance, pay medical people, judges to supervise. I could understand how they'd be really pissed off about having 9 shows canceled. The Josh Barnett versus Ronnie Marks fight that was supposed to have taken place in Hawaii in December has been rescheduled for March 13th at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Connecticut. So that is the main combat sports news of the week. I'll do a separate video later today with the XFL news. I'll answer a few of your questions. David Coleman says, I live in Baltimore. The problem was you had to order your tickets through the mail. You couldn't just walk in the building. He's referring to the Ring of Honor show. And that is true. You had to pre-order your tickets, even though they were free. I did see lots of pictures from the events. Looks like the upper decks were far from empty, and it didn't look like they were using the whole arena. It only looked like they were using about half the arena. Ron Deli says New Japan needs to do a Pancreas type Friday night show, 1 hour show, 3 matches and few promos. I haven't seen much of New Japan. I've said it. I like what I've seen from the style. I like the more realistic aspects of the style, but it's a lot of lightweight guys that I'm not interested in, and the whole thing that it's in Japanese, I'm just not interested in. I like to have connections with characters, and all in all, I'm just not interested in watching wrestling as much anymore. With few exceptions, I would rather watch boxing or MMA. If The Rock returns or if Goldberg returns, I will watch their matches, but none of the new guys really interest me in wrestling at all. Jay Hazard says the whole upper level was tarped off. I believe he's referring to that Ring of Honor show. Ron Deli says Tony said Nyla Rose was from Dudleyville. Mala Fe says, do I think AEW will have a Jericho versus Nyla Rose champion versus champion match since they are both men? It's doubtful. Jericho gets to pick his own opponents. I have nothing against Nyla Rose. I haven't seen much of her. It is weird having women as men's champion now and transgender wrestlers as women's champion. It is a little weird. I actually have noticed the other day, by the way, that some of my acting videos of me doing fight scenes with girls have a hell of a lot of hits, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hits. So I am strongly considering wrestling a female in an amateur wrestling match at the Great North Wrestling event, February 29th in Smith Falls. But it's going to be an amateur wrestling match, and we'll see what happens when a female wrestles a male. Motor Stash, I wonder how AEW would do in Toronto. Toronto is a huge wrestling market, and it's the biggest city in Canada. It's a huge city. And not only is Toronto itself huge, but there's so many cities around it. It's just city after city as you're driving into Toronto. So definitely at least the first AEW show in Toronto would get a big crowd, I would think. Jericho hasn't wrestled in Toronto for a while, neither has Cody Rhodes. I would think it would have a good crowd. Frank Castle says CM Punk has no shame, apparently. Motor Stash, WWE Confidential was way better than any of these WWE Fox Sports shows. Someone says they just listened to the new Sabu interview. What do I think of AEW? Jordan Dixon says this will be my last question for today. I think it's good that it's a place for wrestlers to get paid. Competition to WWE. I like Jim Ross. He's a commentator for it. Nothing. I'm neutral for AEW. I would wrestle there or commentate if they offered me, not commentate, but do like shoot interviews for them if they were interested. This is just a quick question. Have I ever met Bobby Heenan? Yes, I have. He was a nice guy. It was shortly before he passed away. I think it was at WrestleCon 2013, the same one where I recorded Hulk Hogan reuniting with Billy Graham in a video that you can watch here on the Hannibal TV. So subscribe to this channel, and we are on Instagram and Twitter at the Hannibal TV. I'm also on Twitter at Devon Hannibal, and I do post all of these Wrestling Observer updates and many of my interviews at greatnorthwrestling.podomatic.com, and also we have the Great North Wrestling Podcast on iTunes if you just want to listen to the audio version of this. So have a great afternoon, everybody.